My 6 Newspaper Routes by Gregory Brandt. I've had 6 different newspaper routes in my life. They don't really deliver the newspaper anymore, so even if I wanted to, I won't ever do it again. The last newspaper delivery route I ever had was in Vancouver, Washington, about 10 years ago. The very first newspaper route I ever had was in 1999 in San Antonio, Texas. I probably had more jobs than just about anyone you will ever know, and throwing the newspapers is one of the toughest. The quote-unquote throwing part is the easy part. The hard part was waking up at 3 a.m. every morning, rolling and bagging each individual paper, filling your vehicle to the brim with them, and then at the same time drive, look at the delivery list, and grab and toss, multitasking to the nth degree. It's hard work, but worth it. Not for the pay. Every time I did it, I was paid less than minimum wage. The reward comes from waking up every single day, sweating your ass off, working every single day, never getting a day off. The reward is the experience you and your best friend and your romantic partner driving very slow through suburban neighborhoods at 3 or 4 a.m., playing with the radio, passing a joint, having some of the deepest conversations you will ever have in your entire life. Out of the 6 different newspaper routes I worked with in my life, the best ones were the first 2. The first route, the only one that was actually in my name, which I worked with my best friend growing up, Benny, in 1999, and the second route with my girlfriend, Lisa, in late 2000 and early 2001. The other routes I worked was with a friend of mine, David Longoria, in late 2001, early 2002. Then, right after I got back from my first solo cross-country road trip and right before I started my first semester at the University of Texas, I did a newspaper route with my twin brother. We were 26, turning 27 at the time. That was the summer of 2006. That was the only route I threw with my brother, and even though we had spent our whole lives growing up side by side, some of the fondest memories and some of the more deeper conversations I had with him was during those early morning hours, driving around the exclusive Terrytown neighborhood, throwing papers at some of the wealthiest families in Austin. The scummy thing is, though, even though he was making most of the money, my brother insisted that we use my car every night and never his. I go into more detail about some of these newspaper routes in my first book, Gonzo Education. It's available on Amazon. Michael quit his route after a few months. Like I said, it's one of the hardest jobs you can find. Now, the 6 people I delivered newspapers with, every single one quit before me. I outlasted each one of them. A few months after I started school at UT Austin, I was homeless, and my friend Adam offered me to sleep on his couch if I helped him deliver the newspaper. The problem was Adam was from New York City, and he had only had his driver's license for a few months. He could barely drive. I was the one with all the experience and probably would have been the one doing most of the work. But the trainer made sure that Adam was supposed to drive at least the first night. That's what the trainer told us. The 3 of us piled in Adam's Caprice Classic after we got all the newspapers filled to the brim. I laid right on top of the big bags of papers in the back seat, and Adam drove and the trainer sat up front. We only had delivered a few papers when Adam missed a house. The trainer told Adam to put his car in reverse and correct the mistake, but Adam failed to wait for the car to stop moving forward before doing so. And as soon as he pulled the gear stick, you could hear the sound of all the gears crackle and grind. This was my shortest stint working as a newspaper carrier back in late 2006, and it was a good thing because it was also my first semester at UT Austin. I don't know how I would have gotten through that while delivering papers every morning at 3 a.m. I wouldn't work a newspaper route again until early 2013 in Vancouver, Washington. This was my only newspaper route outside of Texas, and it was the worst one by far. But it had nothing to do with the paper. Paper is just like Texas. It was the guy that I was working with was a small-town piece of shit who thought he was Billy Badass. He never ended up paying me either. He ripped me off. If he's still alive, which he maybe isn't, he's probably in the same town, a bigger loser than before. Half the time he was driving drunk. I didn't drink at that time, and I don't now either. Even though he was one of the worst people I'd ever met, I still gave him some deep intellectual early morning conversation at 3 a.m. I was mainly doing it for myself, though. A lot of those small town, uneducated piece of shit dudes, they have no morals. And one night he brought along his shady friend, and I'm pretty sure him and his friend were planning to unalive me to get out of paying me, which he never did anyways, before they finally had second thoughts. We delivered the Vancouver newspaper and the Oregonian on that route. Every paper delivered the New York Times, too, so some houses would get that. The route in Vancouver, Vantucky, finally ended when Billy Badass had one too many at the local bar and couldn't find his keys. You see, even if you miss one night delivering the newspaper on any route, then that's about it. You get automatically fired. That's because you're not technically working for the newspaper. You're listed as an independent contractor, and that's how they get away with paying less than minimum wage. If you miss one night, they gotta find someone to do your route, and that person doesn't even know your route. The only way you even get a day off is if you have a good friend that can take over your route for a day or two, but that's after you memorize every single house, and then you give it to your friend who's never done it before. There's gonna be mistakes. Every newspaper in the United States were so strict to the carriers, and they could be. If you missed a single house somewhere in your route, you had to drive all the way back to your route and give them the one single paper. Each night, they made sure to give you only the exact number of papers every night. So if you had some extras at the end of the night, you know you missed a house somewhere down the line. Me, I'd always cop a few copies before we left the warehouse, just in case we ran out or gave somebody the paper that didn't get it delivered. When you picked up the papers, they were handed to you fresh off the press in a pallet, and you had to take each section, put it together, and roll each individual paper. Most newspapers only had 2 or 3 sections, but the massive Sunday paper had like sometimes 10. Sundays were always a big deal at every newspaper warehouse, and you don't normally see people that active at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. One of the best memories delivering the paper was with my friend Benny on a Sunday on our first route. My truck, a 1972 orange Chevy, had broken down, so Benny's 80-something-year-old father offered to help us. Benny's dad was cool AF. He was one of the only kids' parents growing up who didn't despise me. Benny's dad's full name was Benjamin Woodrow McGee. He got the middle name Woodrow because Woodrow Wilson was president when he was born in 1917. He'd be 105 if he was alive today, and I plan to make it that age or longer. Benny's dad drove a massive red F-350 truck. That particular night, instead of rolling all the papers at the warehouse, we picked up the pallet of papers and took them back to my apartment to roll. There, we smoked pot, rolled papers, while Benny's dad told us stories about World War II and the Great Depression. We had his truck parked down on the ground floor of my third-floor apartment, and we throw the papers over the balcony into the truck below. Another really special memory I have delivering papers is with the one I did it with my girlfriend Lisa. We had already broken up, but I owed her a little money, and she let me work it off by throwing newspapers with her. Honestly, I would have done it for free. After I paid my debt, I continued doing it, and every morning. It was the funnest part about working with Lisa was smoking pot and listening to the college radio station. Me and Lisa were obsessed with the college radio station at this time, and like me, she had a really great taste in music. As I go over different times in my life, especially now, with the most prolific writing period, I see how blessed I am with the memory that God gave me. And even though I won't ever deliver newspapers again, I'll always remember those times that I did. Currently, since I quit smoking pot, I'm the most grown up I've ever been in my entire life. And things are going great. If you want to learn more about these stories about me delivering the newspaper, then check out my book, Gonzo Education. It's available on Amazon. It's one of the highest rated books on Amazon. Everybody have a great day. Aloha.